Hello everyone, welcome to my new channel, and today we are going to start off with the Tamiya's 1/24th scale Nissan Skyline. So without further ado, let's take a look in the box. Here are all the parts for the kit. Clear parts actually look pretty decent. The chrome parts as well too. Taking a look, we have a mesh for the front grille. And taking a closer look to the tires, they're going to need some sanding. And here's the last sprue tree. This includes all the undercarriage parts. And lastly, here are the tech tips and the manual. Alrighty, this kit looks pretty fun. Now let's actually get to the assembly. So I first began the model kit by actually working on the back suspension. This included gluing the axles together and also gluing together the brakes. So I glued the brakes together, and the reason why I did this first before painting is so that they're less of a hassle to put together when the suspension is already painted and the brakes are. After putting together the assembly of the back axle on the car, I went ahead and removed the underbody from the sprue tree, noting to remove any excess that was still left on it. I also went ahead and removed the car suspension. Before I went ahead and painted the underbody, I made sure to put any masking tape on any contact points. This is so the glue can actually dry properly. I then moved on to airbrushing the underbody with Tamiya's semi-gloss black. After allowing the paint to dry, I moved on to painting the details with Tamiya's chrome silver. I then went ahead and painted the brake discs with Tamiya's chrome silver. I then continued the process of painting the brakes by painting the brake pads with Tamiya's gloss white. I would later go ahead and paint them with gloss red. So I painted the brake pads at first with white so the red could actually be highlighted more. So after painting the brake pads, I went ahead and actually moved to the actual shock springs by painting them with Tamiya's flat black. Finally, I put together the back part of the underbody, making sure to use super glue for the shocks. I then went ahead and painted the engine with Tamiya's chrome silver. I then painted the front shock absorbers. After putting together the engine, I went ahead and assembled the front axles together. After putting together the front axle, then proceeded to paint the wheels with semi-gloss black. This included painting some of the interior parts. Meanwhile, I went ahead and put together the decals onto the brake pads. started off with the interior by painting the radio panels on the dashboard with Tamiya's titanium silver. After doing so, I went ahead and started to paint the buttons on the actual dashboard with white so I could later paint them with red. I also did this with the steering wheel. After I finished painting the dashboard, I went ahead and started to put the decals onto the steering wheel. This also included the dashboard, however, that part was not filmed. After assembling the decals, I then began to paint the dashboard where the odometer and the rest of the gauges are with Tamiya's Gloss Clear. Once that was finished, I went ahead and actually glued together the steering wheel onto the actual dashboard. So after finishing the dashboard, I then would go ahead and work on the front seats. I would then later customize the front seats by applying ribbons and also polystyrene sheets to make seat belts for the seats. Since I did not have any aftermarket seatbelt parts, I then made them myself using polystyrene strips and also a mixture of ribbons. This was a very time-consuming part of the build. However, I would actually appreciate the time I spent on them. After finishing the parts of the actual seatbelt buckle pieces, I would later actually use staples to kind of make a more realistic looking adjuster for these seatbelts. I then went ahead and actually painted the seatbelt parts with Tamiya's chrome silver. I would later go ahead and start gluing and assembling the actual seatbelt parts onto the ribbon. After finishing the front seat, I then went ahead onto the gear shifter panel, which I actually painted with Tamiya's titanium silver. I would later go ahead, after doing so, glue together the bottom interior to the underbody. After the poly cement glue dried, I went ahead and actually glued together the dashboard onto the actual interior. I would also go ahead and glue one of the first seats onto the interior. I would then go ahead and glue one of the first seats onto the interior. I then went ahead and proceeded to finish the second seat and also gluing that together afterwards. After doing so, I then went ahead and glued the door panels onto the interior. I went ahead and started the body assembly by gluing together the back bumper and the front face. After going ahead and assembling both the parts onto the body, I would go ahead and actually start scribing the panel lines with a scriber. When I was done finishing the scribing, I went ahead and actually assembled the mirrors before painting. This would kind of be a little harder to mask off, but it would eventually work out in the end. I also went ahead and drilled out the holes for the spoiler that was going to go on it. After doing all that work, I ended up priming the body with some of the Krylon flat black primer. I also went ahead and wet sanded it so that the finish could be a lot more smoother for the application of the paint. I first started by actually painting the body with Tamiya's gloss white. So I've done this masking only once before, and I had some pretty good results. So trying this one out, I also used a toothpick to kind of get the masking tape within the ridges of the body. And then when the masking was actually complete, I went ahead and actually painted the body with Tamiya's gloss red. So then after when the painting was over, I went ahead and actually painted the rims of the windows. And this one was a bit complicated because from earlier, I did glue in the mirrors before painting the actual body. Although it was kind of vigorous at first, at the end of the day, it wasn't too bad. Unfortunately, after masking and peeling off the rims, the masking would actually leave a residue on the body. Fortunately enough, when I applied the lacquer coat, it wouldn't actually affect the final texture or color of the actual body. After masking the whole body, including the mirrors with some mounting tack, I proceeded to paint the rims with Tamiya's flat black. So, after the masking was finished, I went ahead and used a few coats of Model Master's Auto Lacquer and finished the rest of the 8 coats with Rust-Oleum's brand of lacquer. And when the lacquer was dried, I started the grip by using a 2500 sanding sponge. When I was finished with the wet sanding, I actually ended up using a chrome marker to fill out some of the chrome parts. The chrome parts were honestly dull, in my opinion. They weren't really reflective as real chrome would be, so I kind of retouched them with the Molotov chrome marker. For the emblems, I pre-painted them on a piece of sprue and stamped them onto the appropriate parts. After finishing the detailing with a chrome marker, I moved on to the painting of the windshield sprayers, which I just used a black Sharpie with to kind of paint over. I then moved on to the polishing process, which I started with regular car polish and then worked my way up to the Tamiya fine polishing compound. This would give it a lot more of a shine than the car wax would ever prove to be. And I've also finished the polishing as a whole with Tamiya's finish polishing compound. So this panel line wash started off pretty controversial by me panel washing the actual etching on the back of the Skyline. As for the rest of the parts, everything went the same concept, everything. I just dampened up a little piece of paper towel with enamel thinner. So after the panel line washing, I went ahead and actually glued together the spoiler. I used a old decal from another model kit to act as the actual license plate, and only placed the back part of the license plate. After doing so, I went ahead and actually painted the interior of the headlights with Tamiya's flat black. This was just kind of a minor detail, but I really wanted to add it at the end just to kind of make it stand out more. I moved on to painting the brake lights or rear lights with Tamiya's clear red and a combination of clear orange. After painting those two, I assembled them together with the chrome parts. It took a bit of practice to assemble the brake lights, however, after some minor adjustments, they did glue properly. After putting together the rear lights, I also began to glue the headlights. This required a bit of practicing since some of the headlights were kind of confusing and a little difficult to put on. After putting on the headlights, I also began to glue in the clear parts for the headlights. This, again, was kind of a more complicated part and required me to carve the clear parts in order for them to fit. After doing so, I went ahead and used a paintbrush to paint over the interior with Vallejo's black. After putting together most of the clear parts, I ended up actually putting together the decals. So I started off with the minor ones. This did a little bit of work, but for some of them turned out pretty well. As for the front emblems, I left them as is. And although for some of the decals, they weren't easy to see, if you were to see them up close in person, you would be able to see them clearly. The camera didn't really pick them up that well. After finishing up the decals, I then moved on to the windows of the car. Tamiya actually included a masking for the windows, and this actually proved pretty helpful. After masking the windows, I went ahead and painted them with Tamiya's flat black. After giving it a few coats, I allowed it to dry and proceeded to peel off the masking. After peeling off the masking, I realized that there were some fixes that had to be done. These were minor details, however, to kind of fix them, I used a brush and a little bit of 70% isopropyl alcohol. After using this mixture, I went ahead and assembled the windows onto the interior of the body. Lastly, I assembled the two underbody panels together. After the assembly of the windshield wipers, the model was complete. And thank you for watching the video. If you liked the video, and if you want to see more content like this, please hit that subscribe button.